to monitor and manage COVID-19 related cases.
Let's be tough so that we defeat this enemy and we go back to normal life. If we are lousy, we are going to really suffer.
However, majority of SOPs were rejected by most heads of private schools, saying that the implementation would be costly for them, considering the harsh economic situation presented by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Students and school students who went home, stay home.
In a meeting held on September 1st, 2020, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni and the National COVID-19 Task Force agreed on a phased reopening of schools, starting with candidate classes beginning the 20th of September 2020. The proposed reopening will see students in Primary 7, Senior 4, Senior 6, as well as finalists in higher institutions of learning resume studies, but within tight guidelines set by government towards prevention of spread of coronavirus. The SOPs issued in June require learners to be at least 4 meters apart in classrooms. All entry and access points to the school must have foot-operated hand-washing facilities, and all schools must have a qualified medical personnel to monitor and manage COVID-19 related cases.
Let's be tough so that we defeat this enemy and we go back to normal life. If we are lousy, we are going to really suffer.
However, majority of SOPs were rejected by most heads of private schools, saying that the implementation would be costly for them, considering the harsh economic situation presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. Hello, good evening, and welcome to this segment. I am Sima Polo, and this is The Limelight. As authorities in Uganda prepare for a phased reopening of education institutions, it is a requirement for each school to recruit a health assistant to handle COVID-related cases. Schools are required to install foot-operated hand-washing equipment, acquire well-calibrated temperature guns to do temperature screening at all entry and exit points, and the administration must ensure mandatory use of face masks at all times. All learners must also ensure social distancing of at least 2 meters. In addition, all learners in the new classrooms will be expected to be at least 10 for primary and secondary schools. And then for universities and tertiary institutions, there should be at least 15 students per class. This means that there could be a requirement for additional streams and new infrastructure requirements or modifications in order to accommodate more students. Additional teachers may also be required to teach extra classes. Upon confirmation of a positive coronavirus case, the institution is automatically closed. The institution will be cordoned off, secured, and until all the contacts are identified and listed by health teams. The school will be closed, disinfected, and be reopened after 21 days. This is The Limelight. At this point, let me bring in my guest, who happens to be a trained teacher, an education consultant. He is Mr. Patrick Kaboyo. Patrick Kaboyo is also the current National Secretary for the Federation of Non-State Education Institutions, an umbrella body that brings together all proprietors of private schools in Uganda. Mr. Patrick Kaboyo, you are live on Sol TV, and we would want an expert opinion from you to take us through the guidelines, and more specifically, if these guidelines are appropriate in this COVID pandemic.
Thank you, Apollo and viewers. Good evening. I want to say that I listened to the preamble you have given us and the viewers, but allow me to make some few comments. One is that indeed the guidelines are not operating in isolation. They move along the standard operating procedures or SOPs document. But also to say that in your discussion, you indeed said that a school will be closed after 21 days of having COVID in the school. To the contrary, when a case is identified in a school, there should be a management procedure that school administration and teachers should be able to ensure that is in place. And this can only be in place if teachers are adequately trained, and this training must take place, because I'm very aware that the system has started with offering a TOT or training of trainers that are going to cascade the training into the other teachers. I should also dispel a comment made that each school will be mandated to address, to have a health official or a medic in the school. Yes, for those that are able, should. But in case there are issues of financial incapacity, the position should be that health centers that are near the school should offer this support to schools around, and not necessarily having medics come into schools as a new cadre of employees. So it's all about leveraging resources that we have, save for those schools that have been having school nurses or school doctors, they should continue doing the same. But in terms of how ready the schools are, most citizens have said we are not ready because of this and that, ABC. I want to tell you that you will never be ready even if it is next year. So what we have to do is to start and see if candidates are brought to school, how are they going to be in schools learning? And if they're in schools learning, and let's say maybe school X has a case, how are we managing so that we are guided in terms of how to respond if we open full blast 2021? So there is no way we can keep closed, because we do not know when Corona is going to end out of this country, and we do not know when the vaccine is going to be given to those that are sick. But what we know for sure is that scientists in this country are not sleeping. They are working hard to ensure that everybody is safe. And the clarion call that I make, that is going to make our students safe in school, according to what Apollo presented, is the change of practice. The practice that we have to ensure is common in our homes and common in our schools is the practice of wearing the masks all the time. I have not worn my mask today because the distance from me and those that are managing me is quite reasonable. But if you are in a class and you are instructing these learners, you are supposed to have a mask, you are supposed to be audible. Unless you are at home in your family, that's when the mask can be off. But these students at all levels have to be informed that coronavirus can only be kicked out of this country if masks are worn and worn properly. The other issue is on hand washing. You know for sure that if you visit many of our schools, you'll find that hygiene levels are quite disturbing. Washing hands has to come as a new practice. Washing hands with soap has to come as a new practice that you not only use water, but you must have soap, wash properly, both hands wash each other, make sure that you have spent some good seconds washing properly, and after washing, have these students told that you do not have to clean using your clothes or to put on your face or to do all those things that people do, but they should be able to adhere to acceptable health standards. This therefore means that every school administrator should prioritize expenditure where it's necessary in terms of having water, having soap, having sanitizers, disinfect the school, and it would be good that the model for capitation allocation for government schools, for instance, should change. Money that has been given to scholastic materials now, a big chunk of it should go to disinfection and soap. You recall, Apollo, if you're of my age, when I was in school, they used to send us, maybe you bring a piece of firewood, you bring cereals, you bring a banana, you bring a fruit. Some were used for learning, others were used to construct teachers' houses like reeds or a piece of wood. Now should be the time that schools that are in the rural should be asked to come with a piece of soap in the bag so that there is water and they are meant or supported to wash their hands, but wash hands properly. It should be at this time that schools should reinstate the best practices that existed then of health parades. You should be able to see that people are standing 1 arm distance, if you remember that practice in school, but students are able to be identified that have maintained good level of hygiene. And of course, you know that when students report to school, it's a new day, they want to share the experience, how they have been in the lockdown. Some will need to hug. So there is no hugging by greeting because that is a taboo now. So in terms of the school culture, I see a lot of inculturation coming to take place now, that they have to move from the old culture to a new culture. And when we move from the old culture to a new culture, it means that there have to be issues of policy that should bring parents on board, should bring teachers on board, should bring pupils on board. We need to hear voices of students and children on what they are sharing. But we also have to emphasize that gone are the days when parents stormed schools for visitation, everybody sitting in cocoons, in circles, interacting. I'm sure that when schools open, no visitation, and I want to think that in the first 40 or so days of opening, there should be a program to make sure that every teacher is within that school and stays within that school to ensure that we have a national record of how cases are coming up or how they are being managed.
You seem to say that the schools, the teachers are ready. But do you think, or are you sure that the parents are ready for the reopening?
Now, when you say, are you sure, you'll find that there are few pockets of colleagues or individuals who are saying that we are not ready. But my question is, when shall we be ready? Or when will that readiness be guaranteed? The readiness can only be there if one step is taken. Maybe in terms of parents, because everybody has not been working and they are really hard up and financially stressed, it's time that as parents and stakeholders in education, we ask government to make good of the role of supporting education. Honestly, by having HE, the president, instruct the release of a percentage of money from the NSSF, because parents who save with NSSF will be able to buy school requirements, will be able to pay first part of fees, will be able to pay for registration of the candidates, and that money will be plowed back in the economy. There will be purchase power, and that way the economy will slowly stabilize. That's the readiness that would want parents to push. And as we push that, we know that when schools open, everybody will be thinking aloud of how the situation is going to be handled.
Teachers, especially teachers from private schools who have suffered the brunt of the pandemic most. Is there a way, is there a window for those teachers who are not teaching in candidate classes to be called up to fill the gaps now that the streams will be many, the classes will be many? Is there an opportunity for those teachers maybe who have been teaching in non-candidate classes to come and take over and probably get an employment at this point?
You see, Apollo, teaching is not like going into a grocery, you sit behind your merchandise and you sell, or you go into growing potatoes and you watch them. Teaching, you must have the skills, knowledge and values to impart on these students. The fact that these are candidates, you have to ensure that students are taught by teachers who are competent in terms of pedagogy, teachers who are competent in terms of knowledge. So it won't be a gap filling. It has to be a knowledge-based first, and also it should be noted that if students return to school after COVID, I would not advise that they are pumped into academic work in the first week. The first week should be for orientation, getting to know the behavior, how they have been, getting to know their temperaments, getting to know how they would want to be taught, and setting them to understand that we are in a new dimension. And from that way, teachers who should be coming to teach these children also require a specialized training. Not specialized per se that they do not know what to teach, but rather to suit them to the situation which is abnormal. And in terms of the candidate classes, we know that there are variations. There are schools with high numbers of candidates, but also schools with less numbers. If a private school, let's say, has more candidates who are reporting, it means that they also have
All right, there is Patrick Kaboyo, the National Secretary for the Federation of Non-State Education Institutions in Uganda, the corporate body that oversees, that brings together all proprietors of private schools in Uganda. And we probably need to know from him when, of course, yes, and probably we may have to close the limelight from here. And I must thank Patrick Kaboyo for your time. Thank you so much, Patrick, for your time, and thank you for that rich insight into what we should expect as authorities prepare to reopen the schools and education institutions again. Thank you so much, Mr. Patrick Kaboyo, and I must thank our viewers who have been with us all through. Limelight comes to you every Friday in the evening news. My name is Simapolo. I'll wish you a good evening.
Students and school children who went home stay home.
In a meeting held on September 1st, 2020, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni and the National COVID-19 Task Force agreed on a phased reopening of schools, starting with candidate classes beginning the 20th of September 2020. The proposed reopening will see students in Primary 7, Senior 4, Senior 6, as well as finalists in higher institutions of learning resume studies, but within tight guidelines set by government towards prevention of spread of coronavirus. The SOPs issued in June require learners to be at least 4 meters apart in classrooms. All entry and access points to the school must have foot-operated hand-washing facilities, and all schools must have a qualified medical personnel to monitor and manage COVID-19 related cases.
Let's be tough so that we defeat this enemy and we go back to normal life. If we are lousy, we are going to really suffer.
However, majority of SOPs were rejected by most heads of private schools, saying that the implementation would be costly for them, considering the harsh economic situation presented by the COVID-19 pandemic.